At exactly 2:17 in the morning on October 3, 1891, the bell of St. Louis Cathedral rang once, even though no one was inside, and by sunrise, 3 graves in the city had been found open. No bodies were missing. That was the first strange detail. The second was that every witness who heard the bell described the same feeling, not fear, but a heavy, quiet pressure, as if someone unseen had entered the city and was searching for something that had been lost for a very long time. The newspapers called it a coincidence. Priests called it a warning. Most people forgot within weeks, but one man did not. His name was Elijah Mercer. He was not a priest, not a detective, not even particularly brave. He was a clerk in the city records office, a man whose life revolved around ink, ledgers, and routine. His job was to catalog births, deaths, and property transfers. He knew the city through documents rather than streets. That morning, the burial records did not match. 3 graves had been disturbed, yet the records showed no authorization, no movement, no legal reason. The coffins had been opened and resealed. No valuables were taken, no bodies removed. But Elijah noticed something subtle. All 3 individuals had died suddenly. All 3 had been recorded as calm in their final moments, and all 3 deaths had been ruled natural, despite strange circumstances. At first, Elijah assumed clerical error, but errors repeated. Within months, similar disturbances appeared in surrounding towns across Louisiana, always at 2:17, always with the bell, always with the same types of deaths. He began to collect notes, newspapers, church letters, private correspondences. He discovered that the pattern stretched backward in time. Charleston, 1878, Philadelphia, 1869, Boston, 1843. The same time, the same bell, the same opened graves. Elijah became obsessed. His wife, Clara, worried. His friends withdrew. He stopped sleeping. He began walking the city at night, waiting for the bell. In winter of 1893, he heard it again. The sound did not echo like a normal bell. It felt close, inside the bones. He followed it. The sound led him to the Mississippi riverfront. Fog rolled across the water. The gas lamps burned low. There he saw a man standing near the docks. The man was dressed in old clothing, out of fashion even for that time. He stood perfectly still, watching the water. "Elijah Mercer," the man said, without turning. Elijah froze. The man turned slowly. "I have been waiting for you." The man's eyes were not frightening. They were tired, ancient with memory. "My name," he said, "is Thomas Gray." Elijah demanded answers. Thomas did not give them easily. Instead, he asked questions. "Do you believe history repeats?" "Yes," Elijah said. Thomas shook his head. "History does not repeat, it searches." Over the next months, Elijah met Thomas secretly. They walked the river, spoke in abandoned buildings, and shared records. Thomas revealed knowledge that no living person could possess. He knew events before they occurred. He described tragedies before newspapers reported them, and he spoke of death as if it were a place he had visited. Eventually, Elijah asked the question he feared, "What are you?" Thomas answered quietly, "I am what remains when fear fails." Thomas told a story that began not in America, but centuries earlier, during the plague years of Europe. He had been a physician. He had watched entire cities die. He had seen panic destroy order faster than disease. He concluded that fear was more deadly than death itself. In one desperate attempt to preserve reason, a group of scholars and physicians formed a secret network. They studied how some individuals remained calm in catastrophe. They believed these individuals were essential for human survival. Over time, the network grew. Wars, epidemics, migrations, they observed, they recorded. But one discovery changed everything. They noticed that some individuals who died without fear left behind unusual phenomena. Witnesses described sensations, dreams, and guidance during later disasters. The network began to experiment. Rituals, medicines, psychological training. They attempted to create guardians. Thomas had been one of the earliest. He died, but he did not disappear. Instead, he found himself able to move between moments of crisis, drawn to places where panic threatened survival. Elijah struggled to believe, but evidence mounted. Thomas predicted a shipwreck months before it occurred. He warned of a factory explosion days before it happened. Each time he appeared at the scene, guiding a few individuals to safety. Not many, only enough. Why not save everyone? Elijah asked. Because survival must spread. If one person remains calm, others follow. Elijah asked about the graves. Thomas explained that the network monitored those who died without fear. They ensured their bodies were not disturbed, not studied, not exploited. But something had gone wrong in recent decades. Others had discovered their work. Groups who sought power rather than survival. They tried to capture what Thomas represented. They want control, Thomas said. Control of what? Elijah asked. Human reaction. In 1897, Elijah documented his conversations in secret ledgers. These ledgers vanished after his death, but fragments surfaced in 1932, discovered by a historian in Boston. The historian, Robert Lane, initially dismissed them as fiction, but during World War II, he noticed reports of calm strangers guiding civilians during bombings in Europe. The same descriptions, the same eyes, the same words. In 1944, Lane claimed he met Thomas in London. Thomas warned of future crises beyond war, technological disasters, psychological warfare, information panic. Lane recorded everything. His files were sealed. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, several military officers later described an unknown advisor who helped maintain composure during tense hours. The description matched Thomas. He vanished afterwards. In 1977, a nurse in Chicago claimed a man had guided her through a hospital fire, then disappeared. In 2005, survivors of Hurricane Katrina described a calm figure directing evacuation in flooded neighborhoods. In 2011, during a mass evacuation after a nuclear scare, several witnesses described the same man. Modern psychologists analyzed these reports. They suggested a shared cognitive projection, a coping mechanism, but the reports continued. In 2020, emergency responders during global health crises described moments of unexplained calm, sudden clarity, and coordinated action. Some described dreams of a man walking through crowded hospital corridors, always at 2:17, always watching, always waiting. In 2024, a graduate researcher uncovered a hidden archive linking Elijah Mercer, Robert Lane, and several modern institutions. The archive suggested the network still existed, but not as ghosts, as an intergenerational system of psychological guardians, some living, some not. The final document contained a single statement: when humanity reaches its greatest test, they will not appear to save us. They will appear to measure us. The document ended with coordinates. The location was in the western desert of Nevada. A research team visited the site. They found only an empty structure and a carved symbol, a circle. Inside, a single line like a heartbeat. At 2:17, the wind changed direction. Several team members later reported dreams of a man standing beside their beds, calm, watching, waiting. Today, scattered reports continue. A quiet stranger during disasters, a feeling of steadiness when fear should dominate, an unexplained bell heard before tragedy, and sometimes, when history feels closest to breaking, witnesses claim they see a man walking through crowds, untouched by panic.
If he exists, he is not bound to one time or place. He walks through wars, storms, and epidemics. He appears not to prevent death, but to preserve courage. Because if fear spreads faster than disaster, then courage must travel faster than fear. And somewhere tonight, at 2:17 in the morning, a bell may ring again, not as a warning, but as a question. When the moment comes, will you be afraid?
It began with a footprint in wet cement that no living man could have made. In the summer of 1874, in the river city of New Orleans, workers repairing a stretch of sidewalk along Royal Street paused when they noticed something impossible. Overnight, in freshly poured cement meant to seal a cracked drainage channel, a single barefoot impression had appeared. The toes were long and narrow, the arch was high, and at the base of the heel was a small crescent-shaped scar, a mark that would appear again and again across the next century and a half of American history. The men swore the cement had been guarded. One had slept in a chair nearby. No one had walked across it. Yet there it was, a perfect, detailed footprint, as if pressed slowly and deliberately into the surface by someone who wanted to be remembered. That footprint is still there today, and it is not the only trace. To understand the story of the man many call the Walker, you must begin earlier, before the Civil War, before Reconstruction, before even Louisiana became a state. Parish archives in St. Charles County contain a baptismal record dated 1799. The ink has browned with age, the paper brittle. The name listed is Elias Laurent, born to French-speaking parents who had arrived from Saint-Domingue after the Haitian Revolution. Elias was recorded as a healthy child, baptized at St. Louis Cathedral. But here is where the record becomes strange. In 1817, a census ledger from the same parish lists Elias Laurent, age 18, occupation dock laborer, description tall, dark hair, gray eyes, scar on right heel. In 1835, a ship manifest from a Mississippi River trading vessel lists a deckhand named Elias Laurent, age 18. In 1852, a voter registry in Orleans Parish lists Elias Laurent, age 18. The handwriting changes, the ink changes, the decades pass, the age does not. At first, historians dismissed it as coincidence, a common name passed from father to son. Yet no death certificate exists for the original Elias, no marriage license, no probate record. The same physical description repeats in document after document, always with small, telling details. Gray eyes that witnesses described as unsettling, a faint French accent that never thickened or faded, and the crescent-shaped scar on his heel. Then came the war. During the Battle of New Orleans in 1862, as Union forces under Admiral Farragut seized the city, a field nurse named Clara Whittemore wrote in her diary of a man who did not bleed. Her journal, now housed in a private collection in Baton Rouge, describes tending to a civilian volunteer who had been struck by shrapnel near the docks. She wrote that the metal had torn through his shirt but left no wound beneath. She claimed she saw the skin ripple like disturbed water before smoothing whole again. She confronted him, she wrote, asked how he stood without pain. He smiled and replied, "I have already died once. It did not take." Clara's diary was long considered dramaturgical fiction until researchers compared her physical description of the man to earlier parish records. Tall, dark hair, gray eyes, scar on the heel. After the war, sightings multiplied. Railroad workers in 1870s Missouri told stories of a silent laborer who worked without rest and vanished at dawn. A San Francisco boarding house ledger from 1889 lists Elias Laurent,
who paid in gold coins minted decades earlier, his hands described by the proprietor as cold as cellar stone. In 1906, after the Great Earthquake shook San Francisco to ruins, a photographer captured an image that would resurface generations later. The photograph shows a line of displaced residents receiving bread. In the background stands a tall man, uninjured, calm amid chaos. Experts dated the image. They enhanced it digitally in 2007. The face, sharp, angular, matches a Civil War-era tintype labeled simply EL. The resemblance is exact. The walker never seeks attention. That is perhaps what makes the accounts more compelling. He appears at the edges of catastrophe, fires, floods, riots, epidemics. Witnesses describe him helping lift beams, carrying children, digging with bare hands, yet when thanked, he slips away. During the 1918 influenza pandemic, a Chicago orderly named Thomas Green wrote letters home describing a volunteer who worked through the night without mask or complaint. Green noted that the man never coughed, never tired, and seemed not to breathe at all. When Green reached to steady him after a long shift, he felt no pulse beneath the skin. "You are feverish," Green insisted. "No, but I remember when this sickness last came." There had been no recorded influenza outbreak matching that strain before 1918, unless one counts the mysterious fever documented in Louisiana in 1837, the same year Elias Laurent appears again in voter rolls, still 18. Skeptics argue mass hysteria, pattern-seeking, misidentification, yet physical evidence accumulates in small, stubborn ways. In 1932, during construction of a bridge expansion near St. Louis, workers unearthed a time capsule placed in 1874. Inside were newspapers, coins, and a folded scrap of parchment not listed in original inventory records. On it, written in French, was a single line, "I walk so others may rest." The handwriting, analyzed decades later, matched the signature on the 1817 dockworker registry. Handwriting analysis is not infallible, but the odds narrow with each layer. The walker surfaces again during the Dust Bowl migrations. A WPA photographer in Oklahoma captured a man standing beside a broken-down truck, offering water to a family stranded by the roadside. The negative, archived in Washington, shows a distortion around his outline, a blur inconsistent with camera motion. In 1963, a Secret Service trainee swore under informal testimony that a tall, gray-eyed man had been present moments before President Kennedy's motorcade turned onto Elm Street in Dallas. The trainee claimed the man looked directly at him and said, "History resists change." He vanished in the panic that followed. No official record includes this account. It lives only in a recorded oral history collected in the 1980s. Perhaps the most unsettling evidence comes from modern surveillance. In 2005, after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, security footage from a looted pharmacy showed a figure moving through floodwater waist-deep, distributing bottled water from a floating crate. The timestamp glitched repeatedly as he passed the camera. Technicians blamed water damage. A volunteer later identified the man from still frames. She said, "He didn't age. My grandmother showed me a photograph from 1947, same face." Facial recognition software run unofficially by a Tulane University graduate student in 2018 compared that footage to archived Civil War portraits. The similarity index exceeded 94%. The project was never formally published. So what is he? Folklore offers options: a revenant, a cursed immortal, a guardian spirit bound to the Mississippi River. French Creole legend speaks of les marcheurs, walkers between life and death, tasked with balancing unseen scales. Scientific minds search for rational anchors, a genetic anomaly halting aging, a lineage of identical descendants trained to assume a single identity, an elaborate centuries-long performance art piece. Yet none fully explained a footprint in cement that does not erode. In 1974, exactly 100 years after it appeared, preservationists attempted to remove and relocate the Royal Street slab. The concrete fractured around the impression but would not break through it. Tools dulled. One worker reported sliced his palm. Blood dripped into the carved arch and vanished as if absorbed. The slab remains in place. Visitors step around it without noticing. In 2021, a documentary crew filming in Louisiana set up motion-activated cameras along the levee at dusk. They were investigating river erosion, not ghosts. But at 2:13 a.m., a figure crossed the frame, moving against the current, not in the water, but upon it. The footage is grainy, the silhouette tall. He pauses midstream, turns his head toward the lens. Gray eyes catch moonlight. Then the feed cuts. Engineers later found no malfunction.
The second footprint was first noticed in the winter of 1983. It appeared after a night of heavy rain, when the streets of New Orleans were nearly empty, and the Mississippi River rose high against its banks. A street cleaner named Harold Benoit reported the change. He had worked the French Quarter for almost 20 years. He knew every crack in the pavement, every loose brick, every stain that no amount of washing could erase. That morning, he stopped mid-sweep and stared. There were now two footprints. The second one faced away from the first, as if the same person had turned and begun walking. Harold later told his supervisor that the surface looked wet, though the rest of the sidewalk had already dried. He bent to touch the print and said it felt warm. Within hours, city officials dismissed the claim. The area was roped off briefly, then reopened. No official report survives. Harold died in 1991, but his granddaughter still keeps the cassette tape of an interview he recorded for a local radio program. "I know what I saw," he said in a tired voice, "and I know he came back." From that point forward, sightings shifted. Before, the walker had always been described as passing through disaster. After 1983, witnesses began reporting that he lingered, watched, waited. In 1989, a night security guard at a warehouse along the riverfront filed a handwritten log entry that puzzled investigators. He claimed that at 3:07 a.m., he saw a man standing motionless beside the flood wall, facing the water. The guard approached, assuming the man was intoxicated. When he came within 10 feet, he said the temperature dropped suddenly. The man spoke without turning. "Do you hear it?" "Hear what?" the guard asked. "The river," the man replied. "It remembers everything." The guard later said the sound of water grew louder, though the river was calm. He reported hearing distant voices layered beneath the current, crying, shouting, laughter, languages he could not recognize. Then, the man was gone. In the archives of Tulane University, there is a lesser-known collection of oral histories recorded after Hurricane Betsy in 1965. Among them is the testimony of a child named Renee Charbonnet, who described a tall, barefoot man guiding her family to higher ground. She insisted that while he carried her younger brother, the floodwater did not touch his legs. Researchers dismissed this as childhood imagination, yet decades later, Renee attended a lecture about local folklore. When shown a digitally enhanced still from the 2005 Katrina footage, she fainted. When she recovered, she said only one sentence: "He has been waiting for the water to come back." The most disturbing accounts come from the American West. In 1997, hikers in the mountains near Sedona reported encountering a young man dressed in outdated clothing who asked them what year it was. When told, he nodded slowly and said, "Too soon." They asked what he meant. He looked toward the horizon and replied, "The earth moves in cycles, so do we." He then walked away barefoot across sharp rock without injury. One hiker photographed him. The image shows a tall figure at a distance. When enlarged, his face is blurred, though the surrounding landscape is sharp. Digital experts found no manipulation. In 2001, just days before the attacks in New York City, a maintenance worker in the South Tower of the World Trade Center filed a routine report noting an unauthorized individual in a stairwell. The description matches earlier records: male, approximately 18, gray eyes, no shoes. When confronted, the man reportedly said, "This building will fall, but not today." The worker laughed and escorted him out.
The report, buried among thousands of documents after the attacks, resurfaced in 2010 during a digitization project. No identification was ever confirmed. Patterns emerge when the sightings are mapped. They cluster around rivers, fault lines, coasts, water and movement, destruction and rebuilding. Some researchers now believe the walker is drawn not to disaster itself, but to moments when history bends, when outcomes could shift. This theory gained attention after a graduate student named Marcus Hill analyzed newspaper archives and discovered something startling. In multiple disasters where the walker was reportedly present, survival rates were slightly higher than expected. The differences were small, statistically insignificant on their own, but across 2 centuries, the pattern held. Marcus attempted to publish his findings. The paper was rejected repeatedly. Peer reviewers cited unreliable sources and anecdotal data. Months later, Marcus disappeared during a solo kayaking trip on the Mississippi River. His boat was found, his body was not. There is one final document. It surfaced in 2019 when a private collector donated a box of Civil War letters to a museum in Richmond. Among them was a sealed envelope labeled simply, "To be opened when the river runs dry." Inside was a single sheet, dated 1864, written in careful French. The translation reads, "I have walked since the fever took me. I do not know if I am cursed or chosen. Each time I die, I return to the river. Each time, I remember more. I believe I am meant to guide, not to change. If I change too much, something worse comes." The letter ends with a signature, Elias Laurent, but beneath it, in darker ink, written later, is another line, "I am growing tired." In recent years, reports have become rarer, or perhaps more ignored. In 2022, a park ranger in Louisiana documented footprints along a muddy bank after a sudden overnight drop in river level. The prints led into the water and stopped. The ranger measured them, compared them to archived photographs of the Royal Street imprint. They matched exactly. That same week, drought conditions exposed long-buried riverbeds across parts of the United States. Ancient shipwrecks surfaced, human remains were discovered, forgotten settlements reappeared, and in multiple locations from Missouri to Mississippi, similar footprints were found in newly revealed mud, always leading toward the water, never away. If the stories are true, the walker may be nearing the end of something, the cycles he spoke of, the disasters he witnessed, or perhaps the boundary between what he is and what he was. Because one detail has changed in the newest accounts. Witnesses no longer describe him as calm. They say he looks afraid. One fisherman interviewed in 2023 claimed the young man approached his boat at dusk. "Is the river lower than before?" he asked. The fisherman said yes. The man closed his eyes. "Then it is almost time," he whispered. "For what?" the fisherman asked. The man looked toward the horizon where storm clouds gathered, for the memory to return. Then he stepped backward into the dark water and disappeared. Some nights, locals say, if you stand near the old footprint on Royal Senate and listen carefully, you can hear a second set of steps behind you. Slow, measured, barefoot. And if you turn quickly enough, you might see a tall young man watching, gray eyes reflecting the street lamps, as though deciding whether you will matter in the history yet to come. Because the most unsettling question is not what he is, it is whether he is waiting for something, or for someone, and whether when that moment arrives, he will still choose to help.